So because we said yesterday, and I think Emily was saying again this morning, the recommendations that we're creating are going to work towards contributing to the carbon plan that we've sent you the link to, so you can see the wider picture around it. But it is about looking at sort of what can be done and what can be done to help Devon actually move towards this net zero. So we've very lucky to have with us today Jacqui Warren, who's councillor at Torbay Council, and we thought it was important to hear a bit about the kind of, you know, where these recommendations, where this plan fits into wider sort of decision making and how things are done, because actually we need to make recommendations that are going to be able to be hopefully effective and delivered. So we're going to hear now from Jacqui.
Okay, hi everyone, great to see so many faces. I'm just going to share my screen with you all, get the presentation up. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Yeah, we've got some nods there. Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you very quickly for 10 minutes, but as Kayla said, I'm Jacqui Warren. I'm the Climate Emergency Officer for Torbay Council. And I've been doing this kind of role for the last 15 years, so it's really great today to come and share some information with you all, particularly on how the local decision-making processes work and the role in delivering the Devon Carbon Plan. So in terms of this first slide, I'm hoping that none of this is a surprise to everybody, but just to make sure, the Devon Carbon Plan covers the whole of Devon. And what that really includes is, it includes all of our organisations, all our businesses, all of our residents, but it also includes the kind of decision making, the administration, the local governance of Devon. And that includes 1 county council, 2 unitary authorities, 2 national parks, and 8 district or borough councils. And I'll talk a little bit more about what they mean, but hopefully that's not a surprise to everyone. The plan is for the whole of Devon. Now, moving on and thinking a little bit more about those local authorities, we thought it would be useful today to just explain how they all work together and the structure that we have. So, put simply, the Devon Carbon Plan will be delivered in part by some of our local authorities. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we have 11 in total. However, Devon, like many other areas, does have a kind of a tiered system for how we make decisions locally. So we have what's called Devon County Council, which is, as the title suggests, it is an administration that looks after the whole of Devon. And they have particular services that they provide for all of us. However, sitting underneath Devon County Council then is a number of what we call district, borough or city councils. So they tend to deliver much more local services that aren't covered by Devon County Council and at the county level. What we also have, and this is where it gets slightly confusing, is we have what's called unitary authorities. So for myself, Torbay is a unitary authority, but also Plymouth City Council. And the simplest way of thinking what do unitary authorities do is by saying, well, actually they do both what the county council does and also what the districts, boroughs or city councils do. Then sitting underneath any of these at the bottom there, but equally as important, we have parish and town councils. So again, the only difference here is that these are very localised decision makers, but again, really important on the ground doing really practical projects. So all of these people, all of these organisations, can play a really key part in helping to implement the Devon Carbon Plan once it's established. So if we look into a little bit more detail, because as Kayla is saying, you know, the recommendations that you all will come up with, you know, we want them to be implemented locally. So we thought it would be useful just to explain in a couple of minutes some of the powers, responsibilities and roles that local authorities have. And ultimately can help the Devon Carbon Plan to be implemented. So you can see there on the slide, we have the county councils, and as I mentioned, these are the ones that do the services for the whole of the county. There are a number of there, But if I maybe pull out one or two, for example, Devon County Council are responsible for our highways and our transport. So that includes, you know, the maintenance, the potholes, all those practical things, but it also involves the long-term strategic planning for our transport network. And more importantly, the things that we can do to encourage things like walking, cycling, the development of electric vehicles, strategies, those kind of things. But again, at that county level. They're also responsible for things like waste disposal. So all of our waste, when it's collected, ultimately that is the responsibility of Devon County Council for where it goes and the development of, less so now, but landfill sites, things like energy from waste plants and other things, anaerobic digestion, all these other ways that we can dispose of our waste. And there are a number of other powers, responsibilities that they have there. If we then look at that lower level tier, but always as important, at the district level, then the way it works is they've taken the strategic direction from the county, but they are then delivering much more local services. So here, for example, when your waste is collected, that's done by your district council. They are the waste collection authority. And they're the ones that come up with those practical schemes to help you reduce your waste and to maximise recycling. Another good example is they are responsible for housing. So some of us, some local authorities have social housing, so we are responsible for that. But we're also responsible for making sure that all of us live in healthy, warm, safe homes, and we can use powers to enforce that where it's not happening. And there are a number of other responsibilities that we have at a local area, and again at the unitary level. What these powers and responsibilities give rise to, and I think what's really important for today, is that there are a number of roles that local authorities can play in helping to deliver the Devon Carbon Plan. We are service providers and commissioners. So what does that mean? That's, you know, what do we as local authorities, we buy things and we provide lots of services. So we, for example, there on the screen, education and social care, we can actually use our influence to make sure that education and social care are decarbonising in suitable ways. We are landlords, so we own lots of estates, we own housing, so again we have a huge role to play and have power to actually start to really make sure that these buildings are working towards net zero. We also have a really important role, and again powers and responsibilities that allow us to do this in terms of leading by example. So a really good example of that, Devon are working on a kind of a strategy for rolling out electric vehicle charging points across Devon. It's a really good example of how we can show innovation locally to actually create local demand. And I've already mentioned that we have powers and responsibilities, but all of our local authorities, our district level, are what we would class as a local planning authority. So we do have great amounts of power in terms of the new developments that we see in our areas as they develop, and trying to encourage net zero development as much as we possibly can, and in the placemaking functions. And the final thing that I think is really, really important with the powers and responsibilities that we have is we are also community conveners and leaders. So if we think of the UK's carbon emissions, about 40% of them are directly or through indirect influences councils can actually change and can actually influence, but obviously 60% then we can't. And that's where I think local authorities are really good, because they can convene and they can pull together partnerships like what we are here today through the Devon Climate Emergency as an example of a really effective partnership. So local authorities have great power and great responsibility, and like I said, about 40% of the UK's emissions can be influenced by local authorities, but it does still leave that 60%. Just one final point to mention. So I've mentioned there the unitaries, the counties, the districts, and the powers that we have. We do also have two national parks. That is obviously Exmoor and Dartmoor. And just to mention there, they are also really instrumental in helping to deliver obviously the Devon Carbon Plan, but they also act as local authorities with certain powers, particularly on the planning side of things. So again, they are very much around protecting the natural landscapes in particular, but they also do have a waste and minerals, so where all our natural resources are, minerals are, and their long-term management they also have a key role to play in that going forward. Okay, so just a few more slides from me. What we wanted to then explain to you all is that all of these local authorities, but also a range of other partners across Devon, already are taking action, which I think is really promising. It's great. And you can see there on the slide here, there's a number of different local plans. And I suppose the relationship is important to understand. So our draft interim Devon Carbon Plan is, as we've explained, a bit large Devon-wide strategic document, but we do have locally and more bespoke action plans also taking action around creating net zero in Devon. The only real difference is, as I said, is these local plans. So you can see here, Plymouth Climate Emergency Action Plan, Net Zero Exeter. These are just much more detailed plans and much more specific and bespoke to those local areas. Both are equally as important, and there's always a lot of value in a larger, longer term strategic approach, which is what the Devon Carbon Plan is. Because there's always a risk that if we are focusing too local, we might miss things. And equally, there is an opportunity to work much more collaboratively, which is another great thing around the Devon Carbon Plan. It allows us to work much more at a strategic level. Okay, and then the final slide from me. So hopefully we've given you a bit of a feel for how the kind of local governance works and the roles that we can play. And what I wanted to just kind of, I suppose, get you thinking a little bit about today is obviously you're being asked to make recommendations, which is great. And the Devon Climate Emergency Partnership will obviously take those and develop those into the final plan. That will include all of our local authorities. But we do want yourselves to make recommendations, I suppose, to a number of different people. But the key thing being, it's got to be, you know, local. What we want is recommendations that we can implement locally. So that might mean making recommendations to the whole of Devon. It might mean making recommendations to local authorities, because as you've heard, you know, we can influence about 40% of kind of UK emissions. But that remaining 60%, you might want to make recommendations to them. So that might be individual businesses, it might be collections of businesses, it might be communities, and equally it could be individuals. And again, one of the other things we just want you all to think about is what those recommendations might be. So you might want to make recommendations to encourage people to use their influence to do things. So an example of that might be a local council installing charging for their car parks, as an example, but giving away free electric vehicle parking spaces. Or what you might want to do is think about actually a specific action for that specific organisation. So in that instance, you know, Torbay Council installing all of its fleet with electric vehicles. So you've got a lot of exciting, I think, opportunities there. But we wanted to just, you know, the key thing being really that as an assembly and the recommendations that you make, you know, we really hope that they can be as local as possible. But there may be one or two things that come up as well that might require maybe a little bit of government intervention, and that's fine too. But again, we hope that those will be very much more focused then on giving us more power to do things locally.